Welcome back to State of the Nation. It seems there are no depths to which the Labour government will not sink. A week ago, the Commons leader, Lucy Powell, claimed the winter fuel allowance needed to be cut, otherwise the economy would have crashed. For context, the cost to the Treasury of the winter fuel allowance is about £2.2 billion. This claim of crashing the economy derives from Labour's fantasy £22 billion black hole, which they say was caused by the Tories, but in fact was created by them. Half of it came from the government's decision to grant inflation-busting pay rises to their union chums. In other words, £9 billion for the public sector, including, of course, the famously, if not infamously, well-paid train drivers. Ivor the engine would be very happy. But that won't crash the economy, and a mere £2.2 billion will. Odds fish. Let's go back to the Labour Party of 2017, back in the days before Sir Keir Starmer changed his mind about a second referendum, back in the days before he changed his mind on the winter fuel allowance. It was the Labour Party's own analysis that claimed removing it would kill 4,000 people. So is Starmer now happy to kill 4,000 people? Perhaps it will speed up his support for assisted suicide, on which he has promised to vote. But perhaps 2017 is so far in the distant past that we can ignore it. But what about 2022, just 2 years ago? At this point, Starmer had changed his mind on a second referendum and indeed a whole host of other subjects, probably including his friendship with Jeremy Corbyn. But he hadn't yet changed his mind on the winter fuel allowance. He tweeted, "Looking ahead to winter is frightening. I've met pensioners who have no idea how they'll heat their homes, parents who will have to skip meals so their kids can eat. The Tories are too busy fighting each other to notice. Labour has a plan that meets the scale of the crisis." You can hear the violin sound in the background at this dolorous statement by Sir Keir Starmer. Well, we know what his plan is now, to take money from pensioners and give it to their mates in the public sector. Indeed, it was only several months ago when he said this in the House of Commons.
Last year, the Prime Minister was apparently drawing up plans to remove the winter fuel allowance from pensioners. So will he now rule out taking pensioners' winter fuel payments off them to help fund his £46 billion black hole?
But lo and behold, Sir Flip-Flop strikes again, this time on the pensioners. His decision not only to flip-flop on the winter fuel payment, but also to destroy our domestic energy production, means this winter the country faces the prospect of being cold and poor. As ever, let me know your views. Email mailmog@gbnews.com. But I'm joined now by John Rentoul, very distinguished chief political commentator for The Independent. John, thank you so much it was nice to see you, and thank you for joining me. Don't you think that Labour has mishandled this enormously, even if there is a case to be made for getting rid of universal benefits?
Well, I don't see how you can handle that case much better than they've done. I mean, maybe Keir Starmer's overdone the doom and gloom. But if you're going to take some tough decisions, which he said in advance that he would, he said that in the election campaign, you're going to have to take some tough decisions, and people are going to be upset about it.
Yes, of course, and government is to choose. To govern is to choose. But this is a relatively small amount of money in the scheme of government expenditure. And isn't it better to wean people off benefits rather than to do it in a single blow like this, to grandfather people who are already getting it and to ease the pain? Because the people on the cusp will be very dependent on this money.
Well, yes, that is true. And that was true when your party proposed it in 2017, Jacob. I mean, you stood on a manifesto. You were a Conservative MP in 2017. You stood on a manifesto that promised to means test the winter fuel allowance. So
this isn't means testing it. This is just applying it to a certain category.
No, it's means
some
testing
people,
it because it
up
because
to a
it
point.
means.
But some people who aren't on the pensioner credit means will not be greater than those on pensioner credit. So it's not actually a proper means test.
Well, pension credit is a means tested benefit, is it not? And if if you are going to withdraw the winter fuel payment from everyone who is not on pension credit, which is what Rachel Reeves is doing, then that is means testing the winter fuel allowance, which is exactly the policy that you stood on in 2017.
Is that right? Is that right?
Keir Starmer.
But because means testing would be taking into account all the means, and this is saying you only get it if you get a separate benefit, which is A, complicated to apply for, and B, you can be over by less than the amount of the winter fuel allowance and you lose the whole winter fuel allowance. And therefore that is fundamentally unfair.
Well, means testing is fundamentally unfair in many ways, Jacob. It was fundamentally unfair when you proposed it in 2017. But these are difficult decisions that governments have to make. And I mean, you say it's only a small amount of money in the scheme of things, but you haven't proposed how you would cover the gap. I mean, there is a very, very fundamental problem with the public finances over the next 5 years. A huge gap between revenues and planned spending, which the Conservatives left to Labour to sort out. And I think it's incumbent on anyone who's going to criticise Labour for taking this money away from pensioners to explain how they would fund the gap instead.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't have given it to train drivers who are extremely well paid. So it really does look as if you're a Tory voting pensioner.
That's a very insignificant amount of money. I mean, that
but either we're worried about the candle ends, etc., that Gladstone once spoke of, or we're not. And if we're worried about these small amounts, giving a huge pay increase to very well-paid train drivers shows that if you're a friend of the Labour Party, your snout is in the trough. But if you're a poor elderly pensioner, who the Labour Party said might be at risk of death if they didn't get this money, they don't care.
I completely agree that the train drivers were an undeserving case, and that's a very weak spot in the government's argument. I don't defend that at all, but I do defend difficult decisions that have to be made generally to balance the public finances.
Well, John, I admire you for defending difficult decisions. It's actually one of the important things that people have to do when their side is in office. So thank you very much for taking up the cudgels on behalf of a particularly difficult decision. With me now is my panel, Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Amy, this must be quite hard for you to defend as a, broadly speaking, left-winger.
Well, the thing is, when I first heard it, and I thought, well, this makes sense because 1 in 5 pensioners are millionaires. It's a universal benefit. Why is the likes of Alan Sugar getting £300 every winter? That doesn't, I mean, I'm sure he could spend that in an hour in a pub. You know, it's not going to affect his life, is what I'm saying. He doesn't need it. But when you get down into the weeds of it and it becomes apparent that yes, there are those on the edges of this who need to be safeguarded, and perhaps there are more efficient ways of doing that, such as taking it away from the highest bracket taxpayer. That could work for pensioners. But I think the thing that I read today, which really hammered how I feel about this, is that winter fuel allowance is £300. The energy companies make £1,000 per household on average. So if we're going to find money anywhere, let's find it in the profits of the massive energy companies who are making £1,000 off each of us every single year.
Tim, the Tories said they'd do it anyway. Isn't it actually right to get rid of universal benefits? Universal benefits are a bad way of spending taxpayers' money.
It's a paradoxical situation, isn't it? Labour created this benefit and now wants to take it away. The Tories have always been critical of it and now are rushing to its defence. I should add that what the government would say, of course, is that your pension has gone up. And
thanks to the Conservatives.
Thanks to the Conservatives.
Who introduced the triple lock.
But the problem is that, and the other problem is that insufficient numbers of people are claiming pension credit who could. So that's what they would say if they were here. What I find interesting is the position of the left of the Labour Party, who feel that the government is being miserly and miserable in its messaging and now is embracing a form of austerity in its policy. And what they're saying is, look, we did not enter Parliament in order to cut benefits like this. And there's a possibility tomorrow of a significant rebellion of up to 50 MPs voting against it, including, of course, independents who Starmer's already kicked out of the party. And I just want to add that there was education questions today, which included covering the VAT rise on private schools. There were a number of Labour MPs who raised questions about that, because the issue for them is you've got kids with special needs and with anxieties using private education, how are they going to be hurt? So it's very interesting to see the left beginning to kick up a stink about a Labour government, which they see as, they agree with some of its policies, but they don't understand why the budget is being balanced on the backs of some taxpayers and voters who need cash from government.
I think that Keir Starmer would probably say that because of the triple lock, they're not going to lose £300 elsewhere, like a tax-paying in work person who doesn't have the triple lock. So they are ripe to be taxed because they're protected in other ways.
Yeah.
But on the VAT subject, if you do have a learning disability, you are actually exempt from the VAT rise. So that's probably important that parents know.
But you've got to have a statement, and it's quite complicated. But they could put the £300 on the pension, bring it automatically into tax. They could say that it's grandfathered, so anyone who's currently getting it will carry on, but new people won't. The problem with taking away £300 from people who, by and large, are not well off, is that their budget includes that £300.
Yeah.
And therefore you make them noticeably worse off. And exclude the Alan Sugars. The Alan Sugars are so peripheral that the administration...
peripheral.
The administration
it's
of taking it...
1 in 5 that are millionaires.
But that's a very misleading figure because that's based on the value of their house. And they don't necessarily have any income to support that. And you may say they should sell their house, but that's another very difficult question that governments have shied away from in terms of social care.
Can you say there's also a benefit to a universal benefit, which is that it's easy to run and to manage. The low take-up of pension credit's an example of that. People have just not been applying for it. When people automatically get a cheque in the post, everyone's guaranteed to get it. And you can save money on bureaucracy or enforcement because it's so easy to administer.
And there comes a tipping point at which the number of people you remove from it is so low against the cost of administration.
It wasn't worth means testing.
However, the guest down the line did come up with a very important thing, which is that in 2017, Theresa May did propose this, and it was supported by many in the Conservative Party.
Yes, I wasn't Theresa May's greatest supporter, which I did like to point out to John.
It doesn't suddenly change because of which team's saying it.
But did Theresa May do it? Did Theresa May do it?
Well, she didn't do it because of the pushback of what is.
Because it turned out to be a mistake.
Well, so we don't know for sure yet.
Will Sir Keir follow the pattern of Lady May? Anyway, thank you to my panel.